My name's Anna, I'm 28 years old, and if you'd asked me a month ago what my family was like, I probably would have told you we were complicated but fine. That was before the funeral, before the whispers, and before the kind of betrayal that makes your stomach twist. The day of my grandmother's funeral was heavy with summer heat, the kind that sticks to your skin and makes everything feel oppressive. I remember gripping the edges of the pew, my knuckles white, trying to focus on the priest's words instead of the thick tension humming in the air. My grandmother, Margaret, had raised me more than my own parents had. To me, she wasn't just a grandmother, she was home, safety, and love rolled into one. So when we filed out of the church and into the cemetery, my heart already raw, I wasn't prepared for what came next. My Aunt Linda leaned in close, her perfume cloying and sweet, and hissed words that cut sharper than any knife. "Stop pretending, Anna. Grandma never loved you." For a second, I thought I misheard her. But then my cousin Rachel, her daughter, with that ever-present smug grin plastered across her face, chimed in with a smirk. "The house is ours now." Something in me snapped then. I'd been silent most of my life, swallowing back hurt, letting their cruelty slide by. But not anymore. Not when it came to the woman who had been everything to me. So I smiled, slow, deliberate, the kind of smile that makes people uneasy, and said the only words that came to mind. "Check the will." Their smugness faltered, just for a flicker. That night, when the phone rang, I already knew. It was Grandma's lawyers, their voices sharp and urgent. By morning, chaos would tear through our family. Screaming matches, accusations flying, fists almost raised. And then, when the police showed up at the door, everything changed. I realized in that moment, this wasn't just grief. This was war. The morning after the funeral, I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing relentlessly on the nightstand. Half asleep, I squinted at the screen, 5 missed calls from an unknown number. My stomach dropped. I already knew who it was. By the 6th call, I picked up. A man's clipped voice came through, polite but firm. "Ms. Anna, this is Mr. Harris from your grandmother's law firm. We need you at the office today. There are urgent matters regarding the estate." I could practically hear Linda's voice in my head already, shrill and entitled. She had been waiting for this day, salivating over Grandma's old Victorian house in Brookfield and whatever money she thought was tucked away. I threw on black jeans and a simple blouse, my hands shaking as I drove across town. When I walked into the lawyer's office, sure enough, Linda and Rachel were already there. Linda sat stiff-backed in her chair, her nails tapping against the wooden armrest, while Rachel flipped through her phone like she had better places to be. The second they saw me, their faces twisted. "You shouldn't even be here," Linda sneered. I ignored her and took my seat. Mr. Harris cleared his throat and began reading from a thick folder. Margaret's will is straightforward. "To my daughter, Linda, I leave my jewelry box and its contents. To my granddaughter Rachel, I leave my collection of antique china." I watched Rachel's smirk widen, but it froze in place when he continued. "And to my granddaughter Anna, I leave the Brookfield house, all of its contents, and the remaining balance of my estate." The room went dead silent. I felt my breath catch in my throat. I hadn't expected all of it. "What?" Linda's voice cracked, her face turning a blotchy shade of red. "That's ridiculous. She barely cared for Anna. This must be a mistake." Mr. Harris shook his head calmly. "It's very clear." Margaret was adamant about her decision. "The property and finances are legally Anna's." Rachel slammed her phone on the table. "This is bullshit." I sat there, forcing myself not to flinch, my grandmother's voice echoing in my memory, her telling me years ago, "Don't ever let them break you, Anna." But I wasn't prepared for what came next. Linda stood, her chair scraping across the floor, and hissed. "You'll regret this. We're not letting you take what's ours." At that moment, I understood something crystal clear. They weren't going to walk away quietly. This was only the beginning. The ride home from the lawyer's office felt unreal, like I was floating outside of my own body. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. The house. Grandma's house. It was mine now. But in the pit of my stomach, I knew this wasn't a victory. Not yet. When I pulled into the long driveway later that afternoon, the house loomed ahead of me. Its white paint had faded over the years, and the shutters sagged, but to me, it had always been beautiful. I could almost picture Grandma on the porch, rocking in her chair, waiting for me with a glass of iced tea. I pushed the door open, and the familiar smell of lavender and old wood wrapped around me. For a moment, I let myself breathe. But then my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number lit up the screen. Enjoy the house while you can. It won't be yours for long. I froze. I didn't need to guess who it was. By evening, the rumors had already started. My neighbor, Mrs. Collins, stopped me on the sidewalk. "Anna, I heard your aunt is saying you manipulated Margaret in her final days. That you coerced her into changing the will." My chest tightened. It hadn't even been 24 hours, and they were already poisoning my name. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with Grandma's old journal in front of me. She'd always told me to write things down, to document. Flipping through the pages, I found notes she had written just months before her death. Entries about how proud she was of me, about how Linda and Rachel had only shown up when they needed money. About how the house should stay with the person who cherished it, not the ones who saw it as a prize. I knew then I had to fight, not just legally, but personally. They weren't going to stop at gossip. They'd push harder, uglier. And they didn't realize something important about me. I'd been quiet most of my life, yes. But I wasn't weak. As I closed the journal, headlights flashed across the window. A car slowed down in front of the house, then idled for a long minute before pulling away. Linda and Rachel had made their move. And now, it was my turn. The next afternoon, I was unpacking boxes in the living room when the doorbell rang. At first, I thought it might be Mrs. Collins again, dropping off one of her endless casseroles. But when I opened the door, the air shifted. Linda stood there, her arms crossed, lips pressed so tightly they looked bloodless. Behind her, Rachel leaned against the porch railing, chewing gum with that smug little smirk she always wore when she thought she was in control. I didn't say a word. I just stepped aside, letting the silence hang heavy between us. "Cute," Linda muttered as she walked in, her eyes scanning the place like she was already measuring curtains. "So this is what you think you've won?" "It's not what I think," I replied evenly. "It's what Grandma wanted." Rachel scoffed from the doorway. "Grandma was sick. You probably tricked her into signing papers she didn't understand." I clenched my fists, but I kept my voice calm. "There's a legal process. A judge already approved the will. You can't change it just because you don't like it." Linda turned on me then, stepping so close I could smell the bitter tang of coffee on her breath. "Don't get cocky, Anna. You don't know how this family works. That house should have been mine, and I'll make sure it ends up that way." Rachel's gum popped loudly, like punctuation to her mother's threat. I forced a smile, even though my heart hammered against my ribs. Funny. Grandma seemed to know exactly how this family works. That's why she left it to me. For a moment, Linda's face twisted into something raw, almost feral. Then she leaned in closer, her voice low and venomous. "We'll see how long you last in here. Houses can burn down. People can get scared. And scared little girls don't usually fight very hard." She turned on her heel and walked out, Rachel trailing after her, tossing me a wink as if this was all just a game. But it wasn't a game. Not anymore. When the door clicked shut behind them, I pressed my back against it, my hands trembling. I knew then that this wasn't just going to be about lawyers or paperwork. Linda had crossed into something darker. And if they wanted a war, I'd give them one. The house felt different after that confrontation. Quieter, but not in the comforting way I remembered from childhood. This quiet carried weight, like every corner was holding its breath, waiting. I knew one thing for certain, I couldn't just sit and wait for Linda and Rachel to make their next move. I had to get ahead of them. So that night, I pulled out my laptop and started digging. First, I searched court records. Linda had a history, one she worked very hard to keep buried. 2 bankruptcy filings. A lawsuit from a former business partner she'd swindled. Even a restraining order from years back, when she got into a physical altercation with a neighbor over money. Rachel wasn't much better. She had a DUI from college, and a trail of unpaid credit cards that had gone into collections. They'd built their entire lives on entitlement and bad decisions. The more I read, the steadier I felt. This wasn't about me being weak. This was about them being reckless. The next morning, I walked the perimeter of the property with a notebook in hand, jotting down anything that stood out: license plates of cars that slowed by too often, neighbors who seemed to know more than they admitted, even small repairs the house needed. I wasn't just defending Grandma's home, I was cataloging evidence. Later that day, I visited Mr. Harris, the lawyer. I slid the notebook across his desk. If they try anything, harassment, intimidation, I want it documented. I won't let them twist this into their narrative. He adjusted his glasses and nodded. Smart. But Anna, you need to be careful. People like your aunt don't fight fair. I smiled faintly. Neither do I. Back at the house that evening, I climbed up to the attic, where Grandma had stored boxes of old documents. Amid dusty photo albums and brittle letters, I found something I hadn't expected: a locked tin box with my name taped on top. My hands shook as I carried it down to the kitchen. When I finally pried it open, I found more than just trinkets. There were bank records, property deeds, and letters Grandma had written but never sent. In one, she wrote, "Anna, if you're reading this, it means I've trusted you with everything. Protect this house, protect our name. Don't let them ruin what I've built." I closed my eyes and whispered into the silence, "I won't let you down." And for the first time since the funeral, I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt in years. Power. Linda and Rachel thought they could intimidate me into folding. They had no idea I was already planning how to destroy them with their own secrets. It didn't take long for Linda and Rachel to strike back. 3 days later, I was sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee when 2 police cruisers pulled into the driveway. My stomach dropped. I set the cup down carefully, forcing myself not to panic. An officer stepped out, tall with a clipboard in hand. "Ma'am, we received a report of trespassing and theft." "Are you Anna?" I blinked. "This is my house." "Trespassing where?" He glanced at his notes. "Your aunt claims you've been unlawfully occupying the property and removing items that don't belong to you." I laughed, short, bitter. Of course she did. I led them inside, pulling out the will and legal documents Mr. Harris had given me. Everything in this house was left to me. The will has been processed through probate. She has no rights here. The officer scanned the paperwork, exchanged a look, and sighed. "It seems legitimate. Sorry for the disturbance, but we had to check." As they left, I caught sight of a black SUV idling across the street. Rachel was behind the wheel, phone in hand, filming the whole encounter. When our eyes met, she smirked and gave a little wave before driving off. It wasn't about winning legally, they knew they couldn't. This was about harassment, intimidation, wearing me down until I cracked. That night, I called Mr. Harris. "They're using the police to rattle me." "What's my move?" "Keep documenting," he said firmly. "Every call, every visit, every stunt. Eventually, it stops being a nuisance and becomes harassment under the law." "But Anna, don't take the bait. They want you to explode." After hanging up, I paced the kitchen, my fists clenching and unclenching. They wanted me to look unstable, like I couldn't handle the responsibility Grandma had trusted me with. But 2 could play that game. I pulled out the tin box again, spreading its contents across the table. Old letters. Bank records. Deeds. Receipts that tied Linda to transactions she'd probably prayed were forgotten. If they wanted to drag the police into this, fine. I'd drag their skeletons into the light. Because while they were busy filming me, I was busy building a case. And I wasn't just planning to win. I was planning to end them. I realized quickly that fighting Linda and Rachel head-on wouldn't work. They thrived on drama, chaos, and attention. If I screamed back, I'd look exactly how they wanted me to look, unstable. No, my revenge had to be quieter, sharper, like a knife slipped between their ribs where they least expected it. So I started with Rachel. Through a little digging, mostly public records and some calls to people I knew from high school, I pieced together a fuller picture of her life. Multiple unpaid credit cards, a repossessed car, and a current job at a boutique where she was already on thin ice for missing shifts. I didn't need to spread lies. The truth was bad enough. I reached out to an old friend who worked in local reporting and casually dropped Rachel's name, framing it as a tip about someone in town with a history of DUIs and financial irresponsibility who was still being trusted with customers' money. 2 weeks later, a small piece ran in the community section of the paper, no names, just a local employee. But anyone who knew Rachel recognized the description. By the end of the week, she was let go from the boutique. I didn't stop there. For Linda, I went for something deeper. In the tin box, I'd found receipts linking her to a failed investment club she ran years ago, where she'd pocketed most of the buy-ins and then declared bankruptcy to avoid repaying people. A scam, plain and simple. I called one of the old investors, a man named Terry, whose number was scribbled in Grandma's notes. When I explained who I was, his voice crackled with bitterness. "That woman still owes me 10 grand, he spat. "If you've got something on her, I want in." I didn't promise him anything, but I fed him just enough to reignite his anger. Within days, he was blowing up social media, calling Linda a thief and warning others not to trust her. The best part? I never had to show my hand. By the time the rumors caught fire, people started whispering, not about me, but about them. Mrs. Collins mentioned it first when she stopped by with mail. "Anna, I don't mean to gossip, but folks are saying Linda's past is catching up with her. Maybe karma's finally paying a visit." I just smiled, tucking the papers back into the tin box. Karma wasn't doing this. I was. Linda and Rachel had no idea where the storm was coming from. They only knew it was closing in. And I was just getting started. It started small, little cracks in their armor that most people wouldn't have noticed. But I saw them. Rachel's social media posts, once endless streams of selfies and expensive brunches, dried up. When she did post, the comments section filled with thinly veiled jabs. "Maybe pay your bills before flaunting that purse. Didn't your job fire you?" She tried to clap back, but the humiliation was there, simmering beneath every word. Linda, meanwhile, had always been the self-proclaimed pillar of the community, the one volunteering at church fundraisers and pretending she was everyone's best friend. But when Terry and the others started spreading the story of her investment club, people stopped looking at her with admiration. They looked at her with suspicion. The final straw came one Saturday morning. I was sipping coffee on the porch when I heard shouting across the street. Linda's SUV was parked crooked in her driveway, and Rachel was standing outside, red-faced, screaming at her mother. "You said you'd fix this. Now everyone thinks I'm some broke loser because of you." Linda snapped back, her voice sharp and desperate. "Don't you dare blame me, Rachel. If you hadn't gotten fired, maybe people wouldn't be talking." "Oh, please." Rachel shot back. "People are talking because you scammed half this damn town. You ruined both of us." Their fight escalated, voices echoing down the block. I stayed quiet, hidden behind my mug, letting the scene play out like theater made just for me. Neighbors stepped onto porches, watching too. The cracks weren't cracks anymore, they were fractures, deep and widening. And I hadn't even hit them with my strongest play yet. That night, I wrote everything down in Grandma's journal, documenting the progress. Their reputations were crumbling, and now their bond was, too. For as long as I could remember, Linda and Rachel had been united in cruelty, feeding off each other like vultures. But pressure has a way of turning allies into enemies. As I closed the journal, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number again. You think you've won, but you're still alone in that house. My lips curled into a smile. They were panicking. They didn't know who to trust, even each other. And I was far from alone. I had Grandma's will. I had her words. I had the truth. And soon, I'd have their complete downfall. I knew something was coming. The texts, the police stunt, the way their arguments had turned public, it all pointed to desperation. And desperate people don't think straight. It was a little after midnight when I heard it. A faint crunch of gravel outside, then the squeak of the back gate. My chest tightened, but I didn't move right away. I sat in the dark living room, the only light a small lamp by Grandma's old armchair. Then came the sound of a window rattling. I slipped off the couch, heart pounding, and grabbed the baseball bat I'd left leaning by the wall. Slowly, I crept toward the kitchen, where the noise was loudest. Through the glass, I saw them, Rachel fumbling with the latch, Linda hissing instructions at her like some kind of twisted coach. My aunt's face was pinched with frustration, while Rachel's eyes darted nervously around the yard. I let them struggle another moment before flipping on the porch light. What the hell do you think you're doing? My voice cut through the silence like a blade. Rachel yelped, stumbling backward, while Linda straightened, her expression flipping instantly from guilty to furious. This is our house, she screeched, pounding her fist against the window. You don't belong here, Anna. She never loved you. You stole it from us. I tightened my grip on the bat, steadying myself. The will says otherwise. And if you don't leave right now, the police will hear how you tried to break in. Rachel's voice cracked. Mom, let's just go. Shut up, Rachel. Linda snapped, her face twisted with rage. She leaned closer, pressing her palms against the glass. You think this is over? You're a nobody, Anna. You'll always be a nobody. This house will burn before you keep it. That was the moment I saw it clearly. She wasn't just bitter. She was unhinged. I lifted my phone, snapping a photo of them at the window. The flash went off, catching Rachel mid-flinch. Thanks for the evidence, I said calmly. Now get off my property. They froze, realizing too late what I'd just done. Every threat, every act of harassment, I was building a case. Linda cursed under her breath and stormed off, dragging Rachel behind her. Their SUV roared to life and peeled down the street, but the image of Linda's face, wild, desperate, stayed with me. As the silence settled back in, I lowered the bat and exhaled. My hands were trembling, but not from fear. Because now, I had them exactly where I wanted them. The morning after the break-in attempt, I didn't waste a second. I printed the photo I'd snapped of Linda and Rachel at the window, their faces caught in that incriminating flash. I slid it into a folder with the journal entries, the text messages, and notes from every encounter since the funeral. By 9 a.m., I was in Mr. Harris's office. He adjusted his glasses as I spread everything across his desk. You've been busy, he muttered, flipping through the papers. I told you I was documenting, I said. But last night, they tried to break into the house. That photo proves it. He leaned back, tapping the picture with his pen. This is more than harassment now. This is attempted unlawful entry. With the texts, the false police reports, and their threats? We've got enough to involve law enforcement formally. I nodded, my pulse steady. Good. I'm done playing defense. By noon, we were sitting across from an officer at the Brookfield police station. I laid the folder on the table, watching his eyes widen slightly as he flipped through it all. You've kept detailed records, he said, almost impressed. This is strong. I'll file for a restraining order immediately, and we'll open an investigation into the attempted break-in. With this much evidence, they won't be able to spin it in their favor. Walking out of the station, sunlight warming my face, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. Not safe yet, but solid. For the first time, Linda and Rachel weren't the ones pulling the strings. That evening, I stood in the kitchen, staring at Grandma's photo on the counter. Her smile, soft and knowing, looked back at me. "They won't touch this house again," I whispered. "I promise." But even as I said it, I knew Linda. She wasn't going to slink away quietly just because the law was involved. If anything, this would make her more reckless. Which was fine by me. Because I was ready. The restraining order was approved within days. The paperwork made it official. Linda and Rachel were legally barred from coming within 100 feet of me or the property. For the first time since the funeral, I slept without keeping the bat by my side. But I knew Linda. Paperwork wasn't going to stop her. Sure enough, less than a week later, she proved me right. It was a Thursday evening when I came home from the grocery store to find the side gate hanging open. My chest tightened immediately. I dropped the bags on the porch and sprinted inside. The house smelled sharp, like gasoline. My breath caught. I followed the scent into the living room, and my blood ran cold. A small red can sat tipped on the rug, the liquid soaking into the fibers. And on the mantel, wedged under a photo frame, was a matchbook. Someone wanted me to know exactly what they'd planned. I called the police before I even touched anything. When the officers arrived, I handed them the security camera footage I'd installed after the attempted break-in. The grainy video showed Linda herself, hair wild, eyes darting, as she carried the can inside. Rachel stood at the gate, pacing nervously, glancing toward the street. The officer shook his head, jaw tight. "This isn't harassment anymore. This is arson, attempted, but still arson. And with a restraining order in place, it's a felony." By midnight, they had Linda in custody. Rachel wasn't arrested, but the police made it clear she was being investigated as an accomplice. I stood on the porch as the SUV pulled away, Linda's furious face pressed to the window. She mouthed something at me, ugly, venomous, but I didn't flinch. For once, she wasn't in control. The neighborhood buzzed for days. Whispers on the sidewalk, curious stares when I stepped out for the mail. Everyone knew now. The story Linda had spun, that I was the unstable one, the manipulator, collapsed under the weight of reality. For the first time in my life, the roles were reversed. Linda was the one behind bars. Rachel was the one scrambling. And I was the one holding all the power. But I wasn't done yet. Not until I made sure they could never hurt me, or Grandma's memory, again. The news of Linda's arrest hit the family like a bomb. Suddenly, the whispers weren't just about her past, they were about her present. Arson. Felony charges. Restraining order violations. Her name was everywhere, and none of it flattering. But Rachel? Rachel was different. Within days, I got a call from Mr. Harris. His tone carried that careful weight he used when news was both useful and messy. "Anna," he said, "Rachel reached out. She wants to meet. Without her mother." I nearly laughed. Of course she does. We met in a small cafe downtown. Rachel looked nothing like the smug girl who had smirked at me outside the funeral. Her hair was unkempt, dark circles pooled under her eyes, and her hands shook as she stirred her coffee. "She's going to drag me down with her," Rachel blurted before I even Saturday. I didn't want to do any of that. The break-in, the gasoline, I told her it was insane, but she doesn't listen to me. I leaned back, arms crossed. "Funny. You didn't seem too concerned when you were filming the cops at my house. Or when you were helping her at the window." Her cheeks flushed. "I was scared, okay? She's my mom. I didn't think she'd actually go that far." I let the silence stretch, forcing her to squirm. Finally, she leaned in, lowering her voice. "If I testify against her, if I tell the police everything, can you make sure they don't come after me too hard? I don't want to end up in jail." There it was, the first crack of true betrayal. Linda had raised Rachel to be her mirror, her partner in cruelty. But when it came down to survival, Rachel was ready to sell her out. I studied her, remembering every insult, every smirk, every whispered dig at Grandma's funeral. Part of me wanted to spit in her face. But the smarter part of me, the part that had learned to play this game, recognized the opportunity. "You tell the truth," I said evenly, "and I'll make sure your cooperation is noted. But if you hold back, even once, I'll bury you right alongside her." Her eyes flickered with fear, but also relief. "Deal." As I left the cafe, I knew it was over. Linda was already on the brink of ruin, but now she'd be stabbed in the back by the one person she thought she controlled. And I'd be the one pulling the strings. The courthouse smelled of old wood and disinfectant, the kind of sterile atmosphere that makes even the innocent sweat. I sat in the gallery, hands folded neatly in my lap, as the trial began. Linda shuffled in wearing an orange jumpsuit, her wrists cuffed, her face pale but her eyes still sharp with venom. She scanned the room until she found me. That familiar glare, pure hatred, burned across the distance. I didn't look away. The charges were laid out clearly: violation of a restraining order, attempted arson, harassment. The prosecution wasted no time, presenting the evidence I'd painstakingly collected: the texts, the police reports, the photo of Linda and Rachel at the window, and the damning security footage of her carrying the gas can into my house. And then, the moment I'd been waiting for. "Call Rachel to the stand," the prosecutor said. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Linda's head snapped toward her daughter, eyes wide with betrayal. Rachel wouldn't meet her gaze. She walked stiffly to the stand, every step heavy with the weight of what she was about to do. When the prosecutor asked, "Did your mother attempt to set fire to Anna's home?" Rachel's voice cracked, but she answered clearly. "Yes. She planned it. I tried to stop her, but she wouldn't listen. She said if Anna wouldn't give up the house, she'd take it away by force." Linda erupted, slamming her fists on the table. "Liar. You ungrateful little." The judge banged his gavel, calling for order, but the damage was done. Everyone in that room saw it, the truth of who Linda really was. Rachel's testimony sealed it. She detailed the harassment, the late-night threats, even the way Linda had pushed her to film me, to make me look unstable. Every word was another nail in the coffin of my aunt's defense. By the time closing arguments ended, the outcome was clear. When the jury returned, the foreman's voice rang steady: "Guilty on all counts." I exhaled slowly, a weight lifting from my chest that I hadn't realized I'd been carrying for years. Linda screamed as they led her away, spitting curses at me, at Rachel, at the world. But her voice faded behind the heavy courtroom doors. For the first time, she couldn't touch me. Justice had finally found her. The trial was over, but the fallout had only just begun. In Brookfield, news spread faster than wildfire. Overnight, Linda became a cautionary tale, a once respected woman now branded as a felon, serving years for her crimes. Neighbors who used to nod politely at her now whispered with disgust. The woman who had spent her life building an image of superiority had it stripped away in a single verdict. Rachel, though, she was different. A week after the sentencing, she showed up at the house. I almost didn't answer the door, but something in me, curiosity, maybe, made me turn the knob. She stood there in jeans and a sweatshirt, hair pulled back, eyes swollen like she hadn't slept in days. The smirk that had once defined her was gone. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. I crossed my arms but stepped aside. She walked in slowly, glancing around like she was seeing the house for the first time. "I didn't know she'd actually go that far," Rachel said finally. "The gasoline, the fire, I swear, Anna, I tried to stop her." I raised an eyebrow. "You filmed me. You taunted me at Grandma's funeral. You backed her up at every turn until it served you not to." She flinched. "I know. And I hate myself for it. But I was raised by her. You don't understand, she made me believe this was normal. That cruelty was survival. I studied her carefully. For the first time, Rachel looked small, fragile even. Not the bully I grew up resenting, but a woman scrambling to find her footing now that the ground had been ripped from beneath her. "Why are you really here?" I asked. She swallowed hard. "Because I don't want to end up like her. And, because I think Grandma was right to give the house to you. You were the only one who actually loved her." "I see that now." For a long moment, silence hung between us. I thought about all the times Rachel had sneered at me, the pain she'd added to Linda's venom. But I also thought about Grandma's journal, her words about protecting, not just the house, but the family name. Finally, I spoke. "I don't forgive you. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But if you want a chance to do better, to be different from her, you start by staying away from me. And from this house." Rachel's eyes glistened, but she nodded. "Fair enough." As she left, I felt no triumph, no gloating satisfaction, just clarity. I hadn't just beaten them. I'd survived them. And in survival, there was strength Grandma would have been proud of. The house was quiet again. Not the suffocating, heavy silence from the weeks after the funeral, but the kind of silence that feels like peace. It took time, more than I expected, for things to settle. The trial made Linda a ghost in the community, and eventually, she was transferred to a state prison hours away. Her venomous letters, scribbled, angry pages mailed to anyone who would listen, never reached me. The restraining order saw to that. Rachel faded too. I heard she'd left town, trying to start over somewhere no one knew her last name. I didn't care where she went. She'd made her choice, and I'd made mine. For me, the door was closed. The house became mine in every sense. I repainted the shutters, mended the sagging porch steps, and planted lavender in the garden, just like Grandma used to. Every corner I fixed, every room I restored, felt like stitching together a wound that had been bleeding for years. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of gold, I sat on the porch with Grandma's journal in my lap. The last entry I'd written was about the trial, the moment the jury said, "Guilty." I turned the page and began again. "It's over now. The house is safe. I'm safe. And I kept my promise to you." I closed the book, pressing my palm to the worn cover. For the first time since her funeral, I didn't feel the ache of loss. I felt her here, steady and proud, in the walls of the house, in the garden, in me. The revenge was never really about destroying Linda and Rachel, it was about surviving them, about proving to myself and to the memory of the woman who raised me that I was strong enough. And I had done it. As the cicadas hummed and the evening breeze carried the scent of lavender through the air, I leaned back in Grandma's rocking chair, smiling softly. The war was over. And I had won.